second to go for the win. He got it. The Cougars win it. Number one remains number one. Cougars reset. Jackson again finds it. And the Houston Cougars go from the first four out to the Sweet 16.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby.
Yes! Welcome to the Scott Home Podcast, back here in our usual Wednesday night spot with a truly eventful week of Houston Cougar sports talk about major basketball victory, the bat and ball sports in full swing. We have a Big 12 championship to talk about as well, where I think the Cougar men's and women's track teams, I think, gave a good account of themselves in their first ever Big 12 conference championship appearance. We got really that sweet spot of the latter stages of winter sports, early stages of spring sports. I think a literal half dozen sports to talk about tonight, guys. Dustin, you're back here in full voice, and I assume in mostly full health. How are you doing, amigo?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. The weather is beautiful here in Houston. My voice is back to like 98% of what it used to be. Houston Cougar men's basketball is number one in the country. And got some exciting stuff in my personal life that I'll probably brag about in the podcast in not too long from now. So I am doing fantastic. Couldn't be happier, broadly speaking, and thrilled to be back talking to you guys.
Bob, you're here with us in crystal clear new laptop. I don't want to say high definition. I don't know if that's actionable against me to say that, but saw you last week, so not much to catch up on there, bud, because we definitely want to talk outside the show. How you doing, Red?
Good, man. We're good. Just yesterday's temperature and today's temperature here in Dallas is a whopping 28 degrees difference. It's 28 degrees colder here today than it was yesterday. We hit in the 90s on Monday, and it got up to like 45 today. So, Dallas weather, love it.
Good stuff. I can't believe I buried the lead, by the way. No biggie. The men's basketball team is number one again. Like,
are we?
Are we?
Huh.
Ho hum. Just a regular occurrence over here in these parts. Another regular occurrence is us going on our friends at the 1012 Network's Mothership Pod. Bobby and I joined them briefly among many, many guests to celebrate the 500th episode of the 1012 Pod, and we also talked about some Cougar men's basketball. Talked about the Big 12 newcomers as well. Check us out there. Check our friends out at the 1012 Network, generally at TEN12 Network, wherever you social media, the 1012 Podcast, and a host of great Big 12 sister podcasts, along with us here at the Scott and Holland Podcast. And of course, check out our friends at Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com, on the World Wide Web, makers of incredibly comfortable vintage wearables, including a great Houston Cougar collection. Like Bobby was kind of talking about, this time of year in Texas, really, no matter where you are, because it's been kind of wild out here in the West as well. You're going to need some of those hoodies. You're going to need those crew necks. You're going to need the t-shirts as well when it's randomly apparently 90 degrees. Still kind of blowing my mind. Charlie Hustle's got all that for you. Incredible vintage Cougar designs. Very comfortable, like I said at the top. And just by listening to this podcast, whether you're a Houston Cougar or an interested non-Cougar who wasn't blessed by life's lottery to be a fan of this university and its athletic programs, Charlie Hustle has a great collection for you. Use our promo code SHP15, SHP15, like the Scott Holland Podcast, wherever you're listening. Get 15% off. Like I said, an incredibly comfortable, incredibly diverse selection of Houston Cougar wearables from my friends at Charlie Hustle. Guys, let's talk about that number one Houston Cougar men's basketball program getting a very satisfying win. I think if I had one quibble about the schedule, and again, not a major quibble, I'm not someone who's had to ever come up with a 14-team conferences basketball schedule that it takes into account like which teams you want to see playing each other the most. It did kind of bum me out when before the season I saw we would only get one shot at the Baylor Bears, and it was in Waco, and it's just like, I think we might be a better team than them, but I don't know if we're going to be so much better that we could beat them in Waco at their new arena. Fast forward to present day, the Houston Cougars, after a dominant first half, a slightly less dominant second half, and then a very dominant overtime, got the dub in Waco. Guys, I try not to overrate regular season wins, but that was a really freaking satisfying one. I love beating that school. Like, I think I probably in the aggregate have found Kansas fans to be more annoying than Baylor fans, which is maybe a tiny bit of a surprise to me, but don't hate getting a win over that school.
No, always good to beat Baylor, especially, number 11, whatever they were, Baylor. on the road in their own building, and just, another emotional roller coaster of a Big 12 road game. Like, other than the Kansas game, which is kind of just like a bummer throughout, every other Big 12 road game has been just like this emotional roller coaster that comes down to the closing seconds for the most part. And this is another kind of similar roller coaster to one that we've seen before, where Houston takes a double-digit lead early on, but can't salt it away. The other team rallies, and then the Cougs hold them off and win the game. Houston led by as many as 17, 16 at the half. But then the Bears opened the second half on a 12-0 run. And just, that moment when it came down to the wire, Yves Missy hitting his only field goal of the game with 4 seconds left in regulation to tie it, but then missing the potential go-ahead and one free throw. Jamal Shead hitting what looks like the buzzer-beating game winner, but it did not, in fact, beat the buzzer. And then in overtime, Ray J. Dennis scoring on the opening shot for Baylor, making Houston trail in a game for the first time since the Cincinnati game. But the Bears only got one more point before the closing seconds of overtime when the game was already over. Houston's 11-1 run, 5 different players scored. Amazingly, none of whom were Jamal Shead, but he also contributed with the steal in the closing seconds to seal the deal. And, this was cool because it's an awesome win. It's a great win for the resume. It's a great win for the Big 12 standings. It's a great win for just the psychic benefits of getting to beat Baylor in their own building. And this is also a game where you got contributions from all 8 of your rotation guys. But even with everyone, I think, contributing, you still had a standout player, which has got to be Juwan Roberts, with one of the more ridiculous lines you're ever going to see. 17 points on 7 of 9 shooting. Shout out to Jerry Ryan. 8 boards, 4 assists, 6 steals, 3 blocks. Just, absolute box score.
That'll do, Pig. That'll do.
Contributing in every possible way, man. Just like what a game from him in this one, and what a game from the whole team to, deal with that emotional roller coaster of having the big lead, giving it up, and then still finding a way to, thinking you had the game winner, having to then play for 5 more minutes, but still coming out and being the more, aggressive team in overtime and dominating the overtime period. So just, fantastic win. Any win you can get on the road is fantastic. And this one was an instant classic for sure.
Yeah. The first half was just absolutely incredible, right? My mom, who, my parents live in Waco. My mom I wouldn't say watches a lot of Cougar basketball, right? But when they play Baylor, it has her interest a little bit more than usual, right? And she's cheering for U of H and everything. And at halftime, she texts me and she's like, Baylor, either U of H is really good or Baylor is way overrated. And I was like, we're really good, man. We're really, really good at basketball. And as soon as Baylor started their run, I was like, son of a bitch, that's on me. I knew it when I typed it. I knew it. But the thing that really impressed me in the first half and, kind of throughout the game was it didn't feel like, in the first half, for example, we go in up 16 we go into halftime up 16, and it didn't really feel like Baylor was missing open shots, right? It didn't feel like Baylor was, shooting 12% and water would find its level eventually. Like, no, it was legitimately our defense was turning them over, was making them have tough shots. We played that game exactly how we wanted to. And so it felt different than like you're up 16, but again, Baylor hasn't really been making their shots. It just certainly, it felt a lot different. But we saw some of those issues that we've seen with this team throughout the season with this U of H team. Just a game, there's going to be a stretch in every game, no matter the team we play, is an extended period where we just do not score. We went from 40 seconds left in the first half until the 15-20 mark of the second half, and we scored 0 points. But the good thing, though, is we've said what's going to happen to U of H when they do this against a good team. Fellas, we found out it's going to get close. It's going to be tight, but the Cougs may be able to pull it off. And you didn't do this against a team that's kind of on the top 25, a team that you may see, the quality of a team that you may see in the Sweet 16. You saw this against a Elite 8 caliber team, a team that could really do some damage in the tournament. You were able to go on an extended streak of not scoring, and you were able to come through with the win.
Yeah, man, it definitely wasn't always pretty or easy. And I think this is, on paper, no worse than the third toughest road game on your conference schedule. I mean, Kansas at Fog Allen is always going to be the toughest one. Yet Iowa State at Hilton Coliseum, and obviously last Saturday against Baylor at Foster Pavilion. And I would say Iowa State and Baylor are 2A and 2B for most difficult road games. I think Hilton Coliseum is a louder venue, but I would say the style Baylor plays at specifically is more challenging than what Iowa State wants to. I think what Iowa State wants to do is a little more similar to what U of H generally wants to do out there. And it's never, ever going to be easy to be a top 10 or top 15 team at their arena. I think you could probably expand that statement to most of the Big 12 men's basketball programs right now, but especially so in the case of Baylor, a team who'd only lost once in their home court prior to Saturday, and it was that triple overtime loss by 3 to TCU. I mean, there just aren't teams out there right now who go into top 15 opponents' buildings and blow the doors off. I mean, UConn, who I think right now is the rightful betting odds favorite to win the whole thing, just in the last week or so, suffered a blowout to a Creighton team that really metrics-wise is quite similar to the Baylor team we just faced. And I think that second half certainly showed that Baylor was a better team than the one that I think, quite frankly, got run off their court the first 20 minutes or so of Saturday's game. And I think it tells you how special this U of H team is that they so comprehensively outplayed Baylor in the first half and OT periods of this game. Obviously, second half, less so. Second half was, I think like Dustin said, the top, a bit more of a roller coaster. And I think we saw some new wrinkles too. I mean, if nothing else, I think the Cougs saw something on film or in the early goings of this game, and they were just killing Baylor with the backdoor layups. And I think you saw an energy difference too between the two teams in the first half. UH was getting so many easy buckets. It felt like it was the first team to lose balls, all that kind of stuff. I mean, certainly like U2 and all of Cougardom was hoping they would continue for the final 20 minutes of regulation, but I would just say this is too good of an opponent to expect to win by 25 or 30 in their building. Would have been better for all of our, I think, collective cardiac health if the second half hadn't started in that 12-0 Baylor run, but I think this is the kind of thing that's going to happen when you hit a team that good in the mouth at their arena. You'll see lesser teams roll over in those situations. I think we saw it a fair amount when we were in the American, but that's not Baylor. And go back even further, that's not BYU. That's not even TCU, the team that beat us, or Iowa State, the other team that beat us, or even UT Austin. I mean, I think in that first half, you saw Baylor star freshman keep the blowout from getting worse, and then I think you saw Ray J. Dennis really take over a lot of the second half there. But like you said, Bobby, you saw the mettle and toughness of this team in the overtime period. You saw the Cougs really respond after Baylor finally got like the first lead in forever against U of H. And yeah, again, not a coincidence, I think, that the Cougs going back inside with Roberts and Francis on critical OT possessions is why we're sitting here tonight talking about a big statement Cougar win.
Yeah,
go ahead, Dustin. Sorry.
I was going to say, I mentioned up top about this being another emotional roller coaster. And like I said, genuinely 6 of Houston's 7 road games have been pretty dramatic down to the final moments. And that they lost the first 2 of those to Iowa State and TCU. And since then, they've won their last 4. And obviously the Kansas loss was in there. But the last 4 road games that have been real close, Houston has found a way to pull out all 4 of them. And, Kelvin Sampson, I think, has rightfully pointed out the downside of playing in this conference come March, which is that you're just more banged up from playing in so many rock fights, from January 1st onward. But at the same time, this is a team that now knows how to win when they're playing in a crazy environment away from their home arena. The kind of games, this is what people mean when they say like, oh, every Big 12 game feels like a Sweet 16 game or an Elite 8 game or a Final Four game. You're literally preparing yourself for those games by going out and figuring out, how to do it and getting multiple chances to be in that environment and figure out how to come out with a win. So these are the types of experiences you just flatly weren't getting in the American Athletic Conference. By the time that Houston played TCU at Iowa State, they had more of, I think, an idea how to play in a tough road environment based on experience than probably at the end of any American Athletic Conference season that we've played. So I mean, so getting to do that and then get the 4 more chances and getting to the confidence of coming out on top of 4 of those games, I think is something that's going to be invaluable for this team, going forward as the calendar turns to March. Yeah.
And just not to completely change the subject here, but kind of going a little bit more X's and O's.
I just imagine you'd be like, let's talk baseball here, guys. Yeah. Sorry.
Both of you just like, well, that's not my notes. We have a run sheet for a reason. Just to talk a little bit more X's and O's rather than the emotional side of the game. One of the things Sam and I talked about last week was how we looked like we kind of struggled a little bit against a zone defense. In this game, Baylor came out in a zone, and U of H did a great job of attacking it backdoor style. Really showed some backdoor movement in the way they were able to get to the bucket and things in that way. And we really made Baylor abandon that zone pretty quickly early on in the game. I was just kind of looking through my notes that I was taking while I was watching the game, which really start to drop off with about 8 minutes left to go in the game. There's a lot fewer notes than there were when we were up 16, because I think I was a little more paying attention to the game than notes. But I mentioned us attacking that zone and a nice new wrinkle of the backdoor cuts and things like that. And really attacking that zone didn't look great last couple of weeks ago, but against Baylor, it looks like Baylor saw that on tape too and decided to come out and go, they couldn't deal with it last week. Let's see what they do here. And U of H did a great job of handling that zone.
I was gonna say couldn't deal with a good defensive team running the zone, which Baylor very, very, very good at certain things, but I think you pointed out when we previewed it, Bobby, not a good defensive team on the balance here, not a good defensive team the last few years, which I saw a lot of Baylor fans kind of try to blame on LJ Cryer and say, oh, that's gonna be better. And congrats, you played yourself. And just on this topic briefly, I'm not going to hand wring about Baylor fans booing LJ Cryer. Not interested in doing it. If y'all do, by all means. But extra sweet that after all of that, Cryer was the guy who hit the free throws that ultimately put U of H back in the lead for good in OT, hit the last 2 free throws of the game as well. And I wanted to single out 2 other things about this game before we move on. Obviously, you guys have other thoughts, by all means, give them. But one's kind of individual focus, one's team focus. And, I'm not going to say we didn't see the Cougs have any foul trouble in this one. Javier Francis went out with 2 fouls. I don't know if it was before or after the first media time, but it was early. Like within the first 7-8 minutes of the game. But for the totality of the 40 minutes of regulation, the overtime period, I thought the Cougs did a good job defending without obviously fouling against an opponent who even after this game is top 25 in all Division I free throw rate. And it wasn't like this was an unusually friendly crew either. It was fucking Doug Sermons was one of the 3 guys working Saturday's game. I thought that's something this team has improved. I'm not gonna say the refs didn't miss calls either way. That's just, I think, kind of nature of the beast there. But I thought the Cougs did a good job defending without obviously fouling, which I think was a kind of a problem for this team earlier in conference play. And I think is something that's gotten better over the last few weeks. And yeah, I see so much absolute mush brain stuff out there. I'm sure you guys too, that U of H is dependent on getting a friendly whistle. And not that we needed proof to the contrary, because this is a team that still gets called for a lot of fouls. It's still 12th out of 14 Big 12 teams in free throw rate, but I believe there's some improvement happening there. And I wanted my last game focus thought for this one to be on Manuel Sharp, because we saw in this game, and I think we saw in the win over Iowa State last Monday, this guy has grown so much, not just as a scorer, but where he is as a defender now in 2.5 years in the program. It's incredible. And the offensive game is easier to pick up as an outside observer like we are, but the defense is there too. And of course, Jamal Shedd's the guy that gets the most attention, rightfully so. He's the leader, he's the tone setter out there, but this isn't an elite defensive team without the contributions of Sharp, who's also come up huge as as a scorer in that Iowa State game and in this one against Baylor.
Yeah, I mean, it's uncanny. We've talked about it a lot in this podcast, but it remains just unbelievable the extent to which if you see a player, especially like I think a guard, spend 2 years in this program, like year 2 is good. You're gonna have a huge leap. They're just like, I know you kind of the sophomore leap is a thing, but it's just like the predictability of watching guys just like make the sophomore leap in this program has been really impressive. And Emmanuel certainly another example of that. In terms of the booing LJ Cryer thing, I'm not gonna give Baylor fans any crap at all, because I am positive that if Houston had a player transfer in the Big 12 to another Texas team and he came back to the Fertitta Center, we'd be booing him every time we touch
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's totally fine. Like, and anything it adds, it just, I've said it. We said it a lot. Big 12 basketball. It's not boring. It's an absolute wild ride, and that was just another storyline that was just added on top of it that made the whole thing a little. And like Sam said, it made LJ Cryer making those big plays even a little bit more fun than it would have been if he was doing it against any other team. So, just wild game. Was watching it with my girlfriend and both of her parents. Dad just does not care about sports. Was getting so sucked into the game. It was very funny. It was that good of a game that even casuals were getting sucked into it. So excited to be playing these types of games and excited to come away with a W.
Yeah, my mom goes, oh, yeah, and U of H stole Baylor's best player. I was like, we didn't steal him, okay? We didn't steal him. He wanted to be a better draft prospect. He knew what he needed to work on, and he came to the school to work on it, okay? That we didn't steal him.
It'd be kind of cool if we did, but yeah, like factually, I don't think so that we did.
So the Cougs kept the good mojo going, beating Cincinnati at home in their most recent game by a 67-59 final. One of the few home games this year where Houston has just kind of looked off for the majority of the game, I think. Just couldn't make a 2-point jumper or a runner or a floater or a leaner to save their lives. Unlike when they played up in Fifth Third Arena and Houston kicked the Bearcats' butts on the boards, this time they were the ones getting out rebounded in their own building, admittedly by one of the top rebounding teams in the country. In Cincinnati. And then after Houston got a big lead early, the majority of the game was just the Cougars looking like they might put it away, and then Cincinnati making just enough plays to be like, not quite within arm's reach, but like within arm's reach of being within arm's reach. And then right in the, closing moments of the game, the Bearcats finally made their run to try and catch all the way up, pulled within 6 points on 3 separate occasions in the final 90 seconds of the game. But on all 3 occasions, Houston held onto the ball, got fouled, and made both free throws. First LJ Cryer, then Juwan Roberts, then Emmanuel Sharp. And it is, I think, a wonderful commentary on how easy it is to get used to going undefeated at home in the Big 12, which is something you should absolutely never take for granted. But there were some fans, and let's just generously say, expressing some concern about how the team looked in this one. And, Kelvin Sampson made the comment about the team's lack of energy in the shoot-around before the game. And, I think it's just honest. This was a team that was maybe a little bit emotionally drained from having a 4-game stretch of rock fight at Cincinnati, hugely emotional home win over UT Austin, hugely emotional home win over Iowa State to take first place in the Big 12, hugely emotional road overtime win at Baylor. That doesn't mean this team isn't going to be able to get emotionally up for any more games the rest of the year. That just means that human nature means that sometimes you're not at, 100% mental sharpness or whatever you want to call it for every game. And even in a game where Houston, fairly understandably, maybe didn't play their best game of the year at home, they still beat a good team. Literally last year, any of the last 3 or 4 years I was looking at in Ken Palm, this would have been our second toughest opponent in conference play, the Cincinnati team that we just played. We beat them, we forced 19 turnovers and only committed 10, and we're ahead basically literally the entire game.
Yeah, the entire game.
And won a game. To use the baseball analogy, when you see a pitcher win a game without his best stuff, your reaction shouldn't be like, oh my God, he's never going to have his best stuff ever again. You should be relieved and thankful that you've got a pitcher that's good enough that he can win without it. And so that's my energy coming out of this game. Was not the most impressive home win that Houston has had this year, but I think nonetheless a game that we should be excited about and appreciate that this team is good enough to win even in kind of maybe slightly tricky situations.
Yeah, I mean, I put somehow the 8-point final score doesn't feel like it is close enough for how this game was, but also feels like we should have won by more. Like somehow 8 doesn't feel like enough, but it feels like too much at the same time. It's a very weird feeling, but that was kind of the vibe I got. Like I was going through making my notes and everything, and I kind of looked, I was like, we won this game by 8? Then I was like, we were up like 15 this whole game. Like at the same time, I was like, feels like we won this game by like 4 or 5, but we also were up big the whole game. Like you said, Dustin, out rebounded by 12. You don't see that very often. They kind of just looked like they were going through the motions out there. Kind of felt like they were sleepwalking while you were watching the game. But to your point, you still get the win. You still look, you have a home win against a pretty good team. And this is going to happen sometimes, right? Sometimes you're not going to play your A+ game. You're going to sometimes just be checked out of a game. You're dealing with college kids, right? I know there were times when I was in college where maybe a Tuesday just wasn't the best time for me to do literally anything, right? So it's just like sometimes you're going to just have those moments in those games. And I'd rather it happen now at the end of February than it happen in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. This is a perfect opportunity for Sampson to grab his team and go, look, you got by with this one because we are just better than them. You're not going to be able to do that against Kansas in a couple of weeks or in a week and a half. You're not going to be able to do that in the Big 12 tournament. It's a very great time for a wake-up call for this team. And luckily the wake-up call wasn't a bad loss or a loss at home. It was a 8-point game in a late February game, not a game versus a good team in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, one of the teams you just mentioned, Bobby, Kansas, last night, granted, playing a better BYU team than the Cincy team we faced, lost at home and basically buried themselves in the Big 12 regular season title race. Like that could have been us, like letting Iowa State and everyone directly behind us back in with a loss here. It wasn't a great effort though. I mean, it kind of reminded me a bit of last season in that for how good last year's team was, UVH played weirdly bad at home at times. that loss to Temple, having to mount a crazy comeback to beat a worse Cincy team. I think South Florida, we just like let Tyler Harris just go absolutely nuclear against us, that kind of stuff. And that's not a perfect comparison because, like you pointed out, Dustin, this Cincy team would still be one of the very best AAC teams we played year in, year out. So still good opponents, still like a bubble NCAA tournament team, though probably on the wrong side right now. And I think what made it so jarring also is just the order of how it happened. Like, if Cincy scores 59 points, but it's like broken out roughly evenly between the first half and second half, like it's a closer game than we wanted to, but it's not so jarring. But the 42 second half points is just, I don't know, maybe not something we're used to seeing, certainly not at home. I wanted to give one of the guys credit though. And I think no one should get more credit for this game not being an even more stressful affair than LJ Cryer. He allowed the Cougs to get enough of a cushion in the first place that, combined with that kind of early second half run that got it out to, I think, 17 points, really gave Cincy too big of a hole to dig their way out of it. And I know a lot of Cryer scoring happened in the first half, but the Cougs really needed it then because nobody besides LJ Cryer could hit the broadside of a barn. I mean, Not exaggerating. Cryer was the only U of H player who had more than one field goal at the half. And I think something also worth mentioning here, and we talked about this in the aftermath of the first Cincy game up at Fifth Third Arena, that U of H maybe had a little bit of an advantage by having a team with players who have played at Fifth Third Arena before. They've gone through shoot around routines there. They've shot on those baskets before. I think the layman college basketball fan doesn't realize what a big deal it is to shoot on a basket for the first time. It's why you see a lot of these like big stadiums when they host late NCAA tournament games, you see poor shooting percentage because it's just not the kind of background guys are used to shooting on. The same principle probably holds at least somewhat true here for Cincinnati, a team that's played here annually as an AAC program prior to this Big 12 move. It's not a new experience playing against U of H as a really highly ranked team at the Fertitta Center. For some of Cincy's older guys, though, we'll acknowledge they have a lot of new faces who have never played at this arena before. I guess I'm not dying to rewatch this game, guys, but there are so few teams that have ever existed in college basketball that didn't have a game like this one, where they didn't bring their A game. And what frustrates me the most is seeing somebody say something to the effect of, well, I don't know, we've kind of struggled these last three games. One, we won all three games while not trailing in regulation during any of them. Two, those three games came against, in order, the current number 8 team in the country, who's right behind UH in the Big 12 standings, the current number 15 team at their arena, and Cincy, a team that's on the bubble of the NCAA tournament. I mean, this isn't U of H struggling with ECU, Tulsa, and Temple here. These are really good opponents. This is what the Big 12 move means, that you're not going to necessarily just run everyone out of the building like U of H quite often did in the latter stages of being an American team. Doesn't mean we can't come on here and say UH didn't play well for 40 minutes, but I'm going to paraphrase what Kelvin Sampson said after the game. This team is 25-3. It's not a funeral here, guys.
Yeah, and I think despite it not being the team's best effort, you saw enough performances, especially kind of in spurts for different guys. You know, LJ Cryer going off in the first half, like you mentioned. Emmanuel Sharp gave you all three of his field goals in the game came in, I think, like a 2.5 minute stretch, buzzer beater at the end of the first half, and then 2 in the spurt right away in the early second half. Wani, I think, really took up the scoring mantle later on in the game, ended up with 15 points to kind of help Houston close this one out. And I think also somewhat, facilitated by Jamal Shed, who, had his second straight cold shooting night, but also ends up with 9 points, 11 assists, and 4 steals. It's like he's had 2 cold games in a row. He had a double-double in the win against Baylor, and he was like 1 point short of a double-double with 4 steals in this win. So like that's Jamal Shed having a couple of rough games in a row is still obviously contributing in a big way. So that's kind of like that's exactly what we're talking about with winning when you don't have your A game. Is just it's not letting everything go completely to crap. It's still good players managing to make an impact on the games the way that we saw these guys do.
Yeah, and all I want to add is the closeout of the game. We all wish it was a little bit better, but I have one thing. And why is Wani taking an inbound pass in a situation in which they're going to foul? Like, you're not going to find a bigger Wani Roberts fan than me right here. You two can attest to this. But to be honest, I don't even know why he's on the floor at that point. I understand it's probably
Have
for
you seen JoJo Tugler?
Maybe.
God, I love JoJo Tugler. Have you seen JoJo Tugler shoot free throws?
So, I understand if you want him there for rebounding purposes, make him the inbounder. I don't know. But, as soon as he touched the ball, you could see his eyes why did you hand me this thing? Please, somebody not named me, come get this ball from me. And he was immediately fouled and just I just sat there and I remember texting Sam. I said, why is Wani getting the ball here? And then Wani makes both free throws. And I was like, oh. And Sam, what did you say? It was
it's a definition of good result, bad process.
Yeah, it's just like, why? Make him the inbounder. If you don't trust his passing ability, have him set a screen, something. Just don't have Wani catch the ball when you are in a late game foul situation.
By which you mean Kelvin Sampson knew that Wani had those free throws, called up a play specifically to get.
Yeah, that's what it was. We'll all believe that's what it was.
What we're going with. So going forward, the Cougs will be in Norman, Oklahoma on Saturday to take on the Sooners, who stand at 7-7 in Big 12 play, pending the result of their road game at Iowa State starting in about 25 minutes from now. They are the last Big 12 team that Houston has not played this year, currently in year 3 under Porter Moser, who came over after his successful spell at Loyola Chicago. And the first 2 years have been kind of rough, going 7-11 and 5-13 in Big 12 play and missing the NCAA tournament both years. But this year they've been solid in Big 12 play. They're considered an NCAA tournament, something close to a lock, if not at a complete lock at this point. And it's been, kind of a defense first concept that they're winning with. They're a top 25 defense per KenPom, only allowing opponents to shoot 29% from beyond the arc on the year. That's top 10 in the country. And, I like the offensive balance that they have, even with key forward John Hugley, who was averaging nearly 8.5 points per game off the bench, going down to a meniscus tear a few games ago. They still have 7 other guys averaging at least 6 points a game. But, I think the thing that makes this feel like Houston has a better chance, though, even with as tough as road games have been, they really haven't been that convincing at home, especially as of late, which is something we haven't said about too many Big 12 teams. But their last 5 home games, 15-point loss to UT Austin, close loss to Texas Tech, a nice 16-point win over BYU, and then a uncomfortably close win over Oklahoma State, and a 10-point loss to Kansas, who hadn't been able to beat anybody on the road this year. So I think definitely going to be an interesting atmosphere for obviously Kelvin Sampson, Kellen, and Hollis Price and Quantas White and all those guys going home back to Norman. But I think even against an NCAA tournament team that is, playing in their building, I think given the way that they've played at home, given the way that they've kind of broadly played over the second half of Big 12 play, this still is a game that I think Houston looks at and says, that's one we should probably win.
Yeah, not saying OU can't beat the Cougs. They're a team that does certain things well, kind of like you said, Dustin. And I'm sure they'll have a really good crowd in Norman. I think you and I and Bobby are just gonna be pointing out how they've generally fared against the better Big 12 teams, which is not great. They are actually 2-6 against Big 12 opponents who are currently KenPom top 40 teams. And granted, one of those was, like you pointed out, an impressive 82-66 win over BYU, where the Sooners scored 48 second half points. But we'll also note BYU is missing their key big man, Ali Khalifa, for that matchup as well. First game back for Kelvin Sampson, who coached the Sooners from 1994-2006. You mentioned Hollis Price and Quantas White as assistants, who were both on that 2003 OU Final Four team. Kelvin Sampson also grew up in Norman, played for his dad with the Sooners. Lawrence Sampson went to OU as well. A lot of Sooner connections. And I'm not going to say 100% of the OU fans in attendance will give a friendly reception, but I don't know. Just from what I've seen from OU fans online, it seems like there's a lot of goodwill towards Sampson, Price, White, and that era of Sooner basketball generally. I think kind of some of the things you talked about, Dustin, they're a team, I think it's been pretty good defensively in the balance of the season, though maybe slipped a bit in Big 12 play. Someone I'm going to watch really closely in this one. He missed some time a bit ago, but was back for their Bedlam game against Oak State, is Rivaldo Suarez, who had a really good game his first game back off that little layoff, 20 points in Stillwater in that very close overtime win. A lot of size too. Javen McCollum is their only regular starter rotation guys listed under 6'4", one of the better perimeter defenses you're going to see all season. They're top 10 in opponent 3-point field goal percentage. I think the most important thing to watch here is that the Sooners have been the best team in Big 12 play, keeping opponents off the offensive glass. I think if the Sooners can keep U of H from getting second chances, can make things, difficult from 3-point range and be part of a recipe for an upset here. Though, again, I go back to the fact that this team is 2-6 against the definitionally better part of the Big 12. So not saying they can't win, just saying how they've generally done this year.
Yeah, it's definitely a game that if you're U of H, you want to come away with a win. You're playing a team that, like you guys said, is probably in the tournament. A win versus us would kind of cement it, but I think they're pretty much in from everything I'm seeing. Another name to kind of watch for is going to be Jalen Moore. Jalen Moore shoots 42% from the outside. Pretty sure that's it. Yeah, 42% from the outside. And could cause some matchup problems for the Cougs just in terms of how he can kind of stretch the floor. That's going to pull away Wani or Francis, somebody like that could pull him away, and maybe you lose a little bit of the coverage inside because you got to respect that 3-pointer that he's got. Going to be an interesting thing to see if how Sampson handles him, who he puts on him, things of that nature. So that's kind of something that I will be looking for. And like you guys said, it's going to be super emotional, just like we had LJ Cryer returning to Baylor. Everybody on the staff returning back to Oklahoma will be a interesting thing to see, and see how the team kind of handles it, and see how Sampson handles it as well.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes me feel best about this game is Oklahoma being below average statistically in terms of both forcing turnovers and holding on. Houston has to clobber them in the turnover department in this one. I think the recipe for disaster is something happens where Oklahoma just has a particularly good game in that, or Houston just kind of isn't timing things quite as well as they have. And all of a sudden, maybe, because like I said, they do some other things well. They, like you said, Sam said, really good defensive rebounding team in particular. Some good offensive balance, like we've talked about. They do get to the line a pretty decent amount. So, we could, potentially see some Houston Cougars in foul trouble early on in this one. So I think the way that you see Houston kind of balancing all that out is, like I said, you should, quote unquote, should see Houston have a pretty healthy turnover margin for the second consecutive game after they really ran up that category against Cincinnati at home. But, sometimes on the road, things just don't quite play out that way. So, I think as we're all talking about this game as a game that Houston, quote unquote, should win, I think we're all also in agreement that doesn't mean that they will. It doesn't mean that like a loss here is inconceivable or a sign that things are horribly wrong or anything like that. This is just a game where you're the favorite, but favorites lose in college basketball all the time.
Yeah, you're the number one team in the country, but you're not undefeated.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll keep it moving and go to Cougar Track and Field, who competed at Big 12 championships this past week. The men finished in 6th place out of 12 teams with 55 team points. They were the highest placing newcomer to the conference, 10 points ahead of BYU. Meanwhile, the women finished 11th out of 14 teams with 33 points. And although they were probably a little more, I think, in the pack than saying 11th out of 14 kind of suggests, Houston finished 8 points behind Kansas, who finished 5 spots ahead of them in 6th. So not a very big, gap between. There was a larger gap between 6 and 11 where Houston was than there was between Houston and the team directly behind them in 12th place. So, I think maybe a little more in the pack than that number kind of suggests. Team wise, Texas Tech won the team titles on both the men's and women's side. The Red Raiders, just especially on the men's side, the amount of just like men's sprinting depth and dominance that they had is reminiscent of some of the teams they're doing to kind of the Big 12, what Houston used to do to the American Athletic Conference when they had, 6 or 7 guys that were getting in the finals of the sprinting events, the conference championships. So a lot of exciting performances. I think the thing that really stood out to me as my overall kind of broad thought, and I'll throw to you guys for kind of the individual performances you liked, was like literally, I think everyone that ended up qualifying for indoor championships, which we'll talk about in a minute here, is everyone that was on a podium at the Big 12. Like that was the exact lineup, so when we were in the American, we saw this team that, you could have, athletes that were going to qualify for nationals, and you had athletes that you kind of knew weren't, but might get you some big points at conference championships to help you try to win conference titles. That doesn't really exist in the Big 12. Houston got some smaller points from some other athletes, but for the most part, if you want to get some big points in the Big 12, you got to do it by having like a qualify for NCAA championships kind of performance. So that is, I think, a stark reality of Houston's new life in the Big 12, but also exciting because we saw, a pretty solid number of those performances from Houston this past weekend.
Yeah, for me, Davion Wilson, his continued progression in the short hurdles and just the way he's gone from being, pretty good, like top 25, top 30 time at the end of the season to one of the very, very best in the country at what he does has been very impressive. Was officially U of H's first Big 12 title winner, which I think is pretty cool, and I think a deserving athlete of that. I believe he broke the school record in his prelim time, and then broke the record he previously broke with his winning time in the finals, which I think is really cool. And the other athlete I want to shout out is on the women's side. Kellyanne Beckford had her hand in both event wins on the women's side, the individually in the 800 meters, where she ran one of the very fastest times in the country en route to the event win, and as part of that 4x4 relay with Iman Babino, Sydney Townsend, Michaela Mouton. So I think those were all the performances are good. We love all the winners here. And also, I think I'll mention them before we leave this topic. There were some non-event winners, even a couple non-podium finishers who I think are probably names to watch for the long term, who had some nice performances. But I think those were the big ones that caught my eye when I was kind of recapping this.
Yeah, and to the Kellyanne Beckford part, she set a meet and a facility record. So she has the record at Texas Tech in their facility for the 800 indoor. So just kind of a cool little thing there that Houston now has the fastest time in Texas Tech's facility. That's just kind of a fun little thing to throw out there. And then you got to throw it to Grant Levesque, winning the heptathlon. He won the first event, didn't look back, never fell below first place in that throughout all the events. So just want to shout that out there as well. So super excited for the Cougars on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say ran a top 10 time, top 10 U of H program time in the 60 as part of his heptathlon performance.
Yeah, and not only that, those two athletes that you just mentioned, Bobby Levesque and Beckford, both set meet records as well. So that's that. Mm-hmm. Those Levesque with his point total haul in the heptathlon, Beckford with her time of 2 minutes and 0.65 seconds in the 800. Those are both Big 12 championship records. And then, Sean Maswanganyi took second place in both the 60 meter and the 200 meter, both of the men's sprinting events, and pole vaulter Christian Sampe took a close second place as well to finish on the podium. And kind of like you said, that's everyone who's going to be going to the Big 12 championship. We're going to have on the men's side 5 event entries, Sean Maswanganyi times 2, and then Levesque in the heptathlon, Wilson in the hurdles, and Sampe the pole vault. And then on the women's side, Kellyanne Beckford in the 800 and the 4x4 relay as well. And I think what's exciting is not only do you have 2 event entrants on the women's side and 5 on the men's side, but it's not like any of them got in by being 16th and they're probably not going to score at nationals. Kellyanne Beckford 3rd in the country in the 800, the 4x4 relay 7th in the country. Sean Maswanganyi way up there, someone who's very capable of qualifying. Devion Wilson tied for second fastest in the country in the 60 hurdles this year. Sampe and Levesque both in points, like I said, is both in positions where if they kind of finish their in their place that would be scoring points. Levesque currently 4th in the nationally in the heptathlon. Sampe 5th in the pole vault. So really, I think Houston has a great chance to going forward to potentially score in basically every event that they have someone qualified for at nationals.
Can I shout out a trio of freshmen real quick from Big 12 championships that will not be going to nationals, but I think are worth mentioning here?
Good.
Yeah, freshman Caden Broadnax qualified for the 200 finals with Maswanganyi, finished 8th, which I don't think is bad work for a freshman as first Big 12 championship. It's not even easy to get to the finals in the first place in this conference. In an event that I don't think we talked about very much, but hopefully talking about in the future, in the high jump, freshman Andrea Mita, was 4th, and Michaela Mouton, who I mentioned as part of that winning 4x4 relay, also herself finished 5th in the 400 meter finals. Another athlete to watch long term there. So obviously not going to indoors, but I think a trio right there who, if they develop like a lot of the athletes we've talked about tonight and kind of on the show historically, I think those are your future names that you're potentially talking about here in 2 or 3 years, as ideally the Cougs are still competitive in the Big 12.
Yeah, so going forward, Houston will have, and everyone I think has this current weekend off, and then the weekend after that will be NCAA Indoor Championships up in Massachusetts, I believe is where is that this year?
Boston.
Oh, all right, so we'll keep it going with Cougar baseball, who won 2 of their 3 games this past weekend against St. John's, winning the Friday and Saturday games before dropping the finale on Sunday. Cougs won by blowout on Friday, a 12-6 final that saw them put up 4 in the first inning and 6 in the 5th to make this one just never really close. Justin Murray, 4 hits, including a homer and 4 RBIs in that one. On Saturday, it was really the pitching performance of Antoine Jean that was the standout, 6 scoreless with 6 strikeouts against just 4 hits. Trey Jones really leading the way offensively. Homered in the second, RBI single in the 4th, scored on a sac fly in the 6th. Cougs won 7-2 to improve to 6-0 on the year. I believe at that point we're 6-0. with 7+ runs in all 6 games, which I believe I saw was like a first in school history through their first 6 games of the year. But unfortunately, Sunday saw that perfect record come to an end. Cougs actually jumped out to another 4-0 lead early on, but St. John's put up 4, 2, and 2 runs in the middle 3 innings en route to a 11-6 Cougar loss. So, like we talked about, St. John's only game prior to this past weekend was, getting 1 game in of their opening season of the year, opening series of the year against Florida. But not a traditionally super successful program. So I don't know. I had kind of a unsure, takeaway from this weekend just because, 2 out of 3 is always kind of, unless you're playing a really, really good team, 2 out of 3 is always kind of the it's not great. It's not terrible. It's just kind of in between. And given that I don't really know how good St. John's is this year, that kind of even doubles it down. You go, I have no idea how, maybe St. John's is a tournament team and this 2 or 3 is going to look pretty good at the end of the year. Maybe they're finishing, 170 in the RPI and 2 out of 3 is kind of dragging you down, if anything. So hard to know exactly what to take away from this one.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of the same beliefs about this team as I did before the weekend that, I think this is a good hitting team. I was really impressed the way the Cougs chased St. John's Prize starter Xavier Kohlhauser, who had done a good job keeping Florida off balance in the 1 game they'd gotten in before this weekend. A really impressive response in the 5th inning. That 6-run inning you mentioned, Dustin, after the St. John's bats had finally started to wake up in the top half of the inning there. And I really think the 12-6 is a deceptive final score. I mean, the Cougars were up 11-2 after 5 innings, and you never really sweated it. At the end, no UH pitcher got that one unscathed, though I thought Owen Woodward did some nice high leverage work there coming on to get the double play in that 5th inning, not letting St. John's get back into it, and the Cougs kind of blowing it open later. I can't say enough good stuff about Antoine John's Saturday game as well. I mean, we kind of knew, if healthy, that he was going to be a good one just based on he had good career numbers. If you're like a mid-3s ERA pitcher for more than a few innings at an SEC program, you're pretty good. Like, the issue was never that with him. It was just, I think, staying healthy when he was at Alabama. And I've seen nothing through 2 starts, small sample size that may be, to not make me pretty optimistic about him in the weekend rotation. I'm still reasonably optimistic about Jackson Jelkin as well. Like, hasn't been super efficient in either of his starts, but didn't get beat up too bad in either of them either, and definitely showed the swing and miss stuff that we heard about in the fall. It's just that big question mark after that, which was kind of Sunday's game, where Duncan Howard had a nice start, but it all kind of came apart, and none of your guys in relief in that one were especially good, though Jose Torrealba and Justin Murray over the weekend both did nice jobs when they were called into action out of the bullpen. I still think this is a good offensive team. This is a good lineup despite all the new faces. I think I've been really excited about what we've seen from Trey Jones. Ace Reese, the freshman, had some big hits really throughout the weekend as well. It's just that, and there's some proven commodities in the pitching staff. I like Jelkin, like John a lot, and I like some of the bullpen arms you have. It's just kind of answering those other questions and, like, do we have a satisfactory answer to it? And I think the answer right now isn't necessarily no, but it is still, I think, for me at least, a resounding I don't know.
Yeah, and to be honest, going into this weekend, even if you come away 3-0, right, you win, you sweep the series, do you still have a lot of those questions answered at the end of the second series after you played a team like St. John's, who you had questions about how good they were? So I didn't expect to get many questions answered, but there is kind of a pattern that I'm starting to see with some of these games. You kind of go, you look at the stats. Jackson Jelkin, could he have been a little bit more efficient? Yeah, sure. Right. 4 2/3, 4 1/3, giving up 2 runs. Not super excited by that, but 6 strikeouts to 1 walk. Gotta love that, guys. In the games in which we struggle, you see the walk to strikeout rate go the opposite way you're just putting free base runners on. And it's just, that's very exciting for me watching this team and where they have been the last couple of years, is how maybe the pitching staff isn't going as deep into games as you want, but they're pounding the zone. That's what we've been asking for. And they're coming away with the wins. A Sunday game can sometimes get a little tough. Kind of looked like a game in which the bullpen was going to be leaned on a lot in the first place. It seems like we're still trying to find that third starter for the weekend. We're kind of playing with some stuff, trying to get different guys out on the mound when the starter struggles. So,
yeah, I think even in the big loss, the blowout loss on Sunday, you only gave up 3 walks, and sometimes the other team just gets some hits. Again, St. John's beat Florida, probably at least a somewhat decent team. We don't know, but sometimes the other team just gets some hits, and certainly I think that Todd Whitting is probably wishing that Kyle Calametto and or Paul Schmitz were healthy and fully healthy, ready to go to open the season. I think if even one of those two guys are healthy, you have a 1-2-3 weekend rotation that you're feeling pretty good about at this point. So whether or not those guys are going to be able to come back healthy this year, or you're going to have to figure out who that third starter is, that obviously kind of remains an open question, like we've been talking about here. But yeah, on the year, Houston has drawn over twice as many walks as they've surrendered as a pitching staff. And that's something that we've just been pounding the drum on year after year. It's just like, remember when Frank Anderson was here, we never walked anybody. Like, let's just do that. So you know what? I think I'm willing to take the L as long as it just comes from guys, your pitchers maybe being even a little bit too aggressive, hitting too much of the zone with some of these pitches. Maybe what it is, I don't know, but you'll take it as long as you're pounding the zone and not just giving it away for free.
Agreed.
Unfortunately, without all that optimism, we then have to talk about the Tuesday game, which saw Houston blow a lead to UTSA and lose 8-7. Cougs were up 7-2 after 5 innings, but gave up 3 solo homers in the top of the 6th, and then gave up 3 more runs in the top of the 7th to lose 8-7. And after the all-around encouraging start to the year, this was the second straight bummer of a game by the bullpen. And it wasn't even like Whitting was throwing out randos on a Tuesday. It was, Jose Torrealba and Owen Woodward who got hit hard, 2 guys that you expect to play big roles in the bullpen this year. So, it was the UTSA team that was pretty bad last year. They haven't looked like that much has changed thus far this year. So, you never want to overreact to a Tuesday game, but undeniably a bad data point to have on your resume.
Yeah,
I thought UTSA was decent. I thought UTSA was decent last year.
Decent last year?
Yeah, but this year
Keep talking, Bobby.
Yeah, but this year they have lost to Lamar, Tarleton, and Texas Arlington. So
Fair.
Last year is a great thing to look at, but this year you have those 3 losses, and then you come into our house and beat us. I don't care what you look like last year. That's bad. That's just a bad loss. But again, it's hard to win baseball games when you give up 8 runs. It doesn't matter who you're playing. Doesn't matter if you give up 8. It's going to be pretty tough to win.
Yeah, you hate losing anything from a 7-2 lead. That's that's the biggest bummer.
Yeah, I think I was thinking of UTSA's softball team, who we also play this year. Yeah, they were terrible in softball last year. They were actually top 100 in baseball last year. So it is early. Maybe they'll end up being, not a terrible team. I feel a little bit better knowing that. This whole time I've been thinking, like, weren't they in like 200s last year in RPI? They were not. So I don't know. Maybe they'll balance out. It's very, very early on. We're still talking about.
They have a loss to Tarleton.
I was just gonna say I will end this on a happy note.
Damn it.
They're D1 now. They got scholarship too, man.
Come on, man. You'd be smirching the Texans. They're the Texans, right?
Yes.
Harold Call. Shout out Harold Call. Second home run of the season to lead off the Cougars in scoring. Trey Jones had another nice game with 2 or 4 with the stolen base. We'll say, just like it seemed like, and I was hearing from all of y'all that still live in the Houston area, that was a super windy day. And I think UTSA hit like 3 homers in 1 inning. I think it was off Torrealba. It's just frustrating that our bats just kind of went missing late in this one. And you never want to lose a game where you have a big lead, though it's a Tuesday game in February, so it may not mean ultimately a whole heck of a lot.
I see your point on, like, it's disappointing to see the bats go cold late in the game. We still put up 7 runs. You should win most games you put up 7.
It's not the biggest problem, but
yeah.
Again, just hate that our bullpen faltered so much late, and I think we got like 3 hits off UTSA's last 4 2/3 innings of relief.
Yeah.
But Bobby, we only scored 7 runs against a team that lost to Tarleton. So I mean, if they lose to Tarleton, you should be able to score.
Fair point. That's a fair point. That is a fair point.
So looking forward to this coming weekend. The Cougars will be at Minute Maid Park for the Astros Foundation College Classic, where they will be taking on Texas State on Friday, Vanderbilt on Saturday, and Louisiana Lafayette on Sunday. Really excited for this weekend. It is really Cougar baseball's first chance to get some actual significant resume wins. That I don't think they've really had any of those games coming up until this point. Texas State, the Bobcats they've had some really good teams recently, missed the NCAA tournament field last year, but we're still a solid team. This year they've beaten up on some small schools, 1-3 in their 4 games against power conference teams. Vanderbilt, just consistent baseball power, number 9 in the current D1 baseball poll. And the Raging Cajuns, they were an at-large team last year. They won 41 games. They did just lose 2 out of 3 at home to Rice this past weekend while only scoring 5 total runs in 3 games. And the Owls haven't been great the last several years, so maybe that is an early indication of trouble in Lafayette. But I think overall, really exciting weekend. And like I said, you just really haven't gotten a chance at the resume building wins. And this is a weekend where you go 2 out of 3 this weekend. That's something that is going to actually significantly build your resume in a way that going 2 against 3 against St. John's, like I said, maybe, but probably not going to be the same kind of thing.
I think you took a lot of my points for the specific teams, Dustin. I'm just going to say that I know U of H hasn't had the best win-loss record in the past decade or so, playing at the various iterations of the Astros college baseball event at Minute Maid Park. And I'm okay that this is no longer an event we play in every single year. I don't know, though. Maybe it's nostalgia from going to so many Cougar baseball games in the early season at Minute Maid Park, a number of them with you two, my good friends and co-hosts. But I'm happy U of H is back playing in this. I'm happy that I'm happy that I can may or may not follow U of H baseball at 9 a.m. my time on Friday. Like that's really cool. I love like the early regular season tournaments at an LB stadium that kind of allow you some early weekend baseball.
Here's to Sam's boss not actually listening to the pod for that one.
No chance,
baby. No. Yeah, really excited. Just like you guys, like Sam just said, really for the nostalgia of playing in the Minute Maid Classic, and that's what I will call it. And just being in college, showing your student ID, and we would buy the $30 pack for tickets, and you could get every game of the whole tournament. And then it was like a hot dog and drink was included. It was like $30 with your student ticket, and we would just spend all day there. We'd be there 11 o'clock first pitch. We'd get there about 10:30 to make sure we were there on time. And then we wouldn't leave till 11 o'clock that night. And we would just watch baseball, and all day. And we would watch random games. One of my favorite memories was, I always think about this, and it was Baylor was playing somebody, and they're up. No, Baylor is down 1. No, they're tied. And they have a guy hit it into the outfield. The guy rounds third, he stops. The guy the batter went to take second and got thrown out, and it ends the inning and it ends the game. And it goes into extras. And I'll never forget Dustin yelling at him going, "Why are you running? You don't matter. You don't matter." And anytime I see a bonehead running play in baseball, I'm always just like, you don't matter. It doesn't matter. That run does not matter. And Dustin said it, and I was like, actually, he's right. That runner doesn't matter. What was he running for?
No, yeah, lots of good memories from watching Cougar baseball and other teams as well at the Minute Maid Classic. A couple of favorites was the one time I ever actually went out and it was available, and I did actually go sit in the Crawford boxes, was Rice was playing somebody in the nightcap after we had played earlier in the day, and ended up sitting in next to this kind of middle-aged guy and his kid, and we start chatting after a while. Turns out it was Anthony Rendone's uncle and his cousin. And I was just like, I kind of, so we were kind of chatting, and at one point I'm just like, man, like politely, like, what the hell is Anthony Rendone doing in college right now? Like 750, he homers every third at bat. Like, why is this guy playing? He's an unbelievably good defensive third baseman. Like, what on earth is this guy doing in college? And he goes, well, when he came out of high school, he was one of the it was him and this other guy, I don't remember his name, were considered the top 2 position players playing high school ball.
He was such a good high school baseball player that I was peripherally aware of him as someone who went to another Houston high school.
It was him and this other guy were kind of the big 1-2, hitters coming out of high school in Houston. And the other guy got drafted a little bit ahead of him, and the other guy got a $1 million signing bonus, which is, decent, but not a huge amount for an elite prospect. And Anthony Rendone was like, I'm as good as that guy. I want a $1 million signing bonus. And the Braves had drafted him. And the Braves did not think he was $1 million good and did not give him his $1 million signing bonus. And he goes, I'm telling you, he goes, half of the games that Rice has played, a Braves scout will come up to his mom and be like, we are so sorry that we
somebody got fired.
Yeah, got fired over saying, Anthony Rendone doesn't have $1 million valuation coming out of high school. That, and the one random time when I was sitting down the third base line in foul territory, and a ball hooked around the third base line fair was coming down to the line for a double, and I was sitting next to a guy who was reaching over to grab it, and I was like, let it go. And guy yelled at him and got him to pull away at the last second and not go for the ball. And he's like, oh my God, thank you. I totally lost track of time. And his kid was all mad at him because he didn't grab him the ball. He's like, no, you don't understand. You can't just grab it. And showing my baseball IQ there as I pat myself on the back for that one.
It's your hero moment.
That one, and when you had to leave U of H versus A&M.
You had an overnight.
One of my favorite stories is Dustin had to leave because he had an overnight shift where he was working, and he would ask me often to update him on games as they went along, and I was so bad at it. I would never Dustin would text me this was pre-ESPN on your phone, really, but Dustin would.
This was flip phone time. Yeah, we all had flip phones.
Dustin would text me 2 hours after the game, and it'd be like, "Hey, man, what happened?" And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, we won." And so we're playing A&M, and Dustin texts. He looks at me and he goes, "I have to go, but you better update me pitch by pitch updates." And so every pitch, I would just type ball, strike, ball, ball, and Dustin couldn't text back fast enough. Batter by batter will be enough, because I was just constantly sending him text. And finally, after a half inning, he goes, "All right, I get it. I just want batter by batter updates." And I was like, "Okay, sounds good."
I thought it was you were just inning end will suffice or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. It was just.
I believe my exact text message, if I remember correctly, was inning by inning updates will do just fine. Thank you.
Good stuff. Real window into the kind of friends we are.
I could go another 20 minutes with all.
Oh yeah, we could go. We could go hours on
Minute Maid classic anecdotes.
We'll probably go ahead and move on to Cougar softball, who went 2-3 in Baton Rouge this past weekend. Cougs got 2 shots at the host top 10 LSU Tigers. They lost 10-3 and 5-0. Also lost 9-1 to a receiving votes in the top 25 Boise State team. And then they bookended those losses with 2 wins over Austin Peay, a 10-1 run rule to open the weekend. And then in the finale went up 5-0, ended up holding off Austin Peay 5-3 to get the win. So, while I don't think anything happened resume-wise that's going to doom Houston this year, because they didn't take any bad losses. They really still haven't taken any, I don't think, bad losses on the year. They also went 0-3 in their first 3 chances to pick up resume-enhancing wins. And I also think that it's probably not a great sign for the area of the team that we're most concerned about, the pitching staff, that in their 3 games against good teams this weekend, they gave up 10, 9, and 5 runs, easily more than a run per inning. Not what you want to see.
Yeah, I'll give the team credit. Both the LSU games were more competitive than I expected. I mean, you're playing a top 10 opponent at their field. I think what disappointed me and almost made me start to go back to reevaluating how I feel about this team was how uncompetitive the loss to Boise State was, because that was kind of your litmus test for the Tiger Classic. Not saying it was a must win. I mean, Boise's a good top 25 receiving votes kind of team, but for me, it was a must be competitive game. And to lose 9-1 in a game where you were never really close in after the top of the second inning really fails the being competitive testing. And kind of like you said, Dustin, it begs the bigger picture question of, one, pitching is the exact kind of level of problem that we expected to be in the preseason. Now you're down one of your expected 4 pitchers. And 2, why is Boise State a punchy on the periphery of the top 25 team that competed much harder with LSU in their 2 games, and U of H, a program that was at one time very much fit that description that I just gave, not even close to that level? I'm not trying to turn every loss into a referendum on why U of H hasn't made a softball leadership change, but I think this weekend, even though it wasn't even close to the worst case scenario, I think kind of laid bare some of the fundamental problems that this program has and continues to show. I mean, am I overreacting, guys?
I mean, I'd like to see more of the season before I want to write everything off. But I mean, Boise, I have in my notes the exact same thing. This was your first real test where you should at least look competitive, and you just didn't. We were worried about the pitching staff coming in and kind of, questioning why was this the pitching staff that we assembled. We had a ton of bats come in. We're all super excited about them, and they've shown up, right? The bats have shown up in just about every game that you've played. 3 runs against LSU, probably not enough to win, but still a pretty good performance against a top 10 team. But I mean, you look at the staff ERA and you're looking at 3.83 ERA. If you're doing baseball, You're pretty happy with that. In softball, that's not good, guys. If you give up 4 runs a game in softball, you're probably going to lose a lot of games. Now, the good thing is this team can hit a ton, right? And can score a bunch, but you got a 4 ERA against a schedule that I wouldn't say has been, really challenging outside of this weekend. And the couple of games that you had against the challenging teams, they showed you how far behind we actually are.
Yeah, the thing that if I've learned anything from being a softball fan for the last several years and watching Houston specifically, it's that it is infinitely better to have a very good pitching staff and an average lineup than a very good lineup and an average pitching staff. Mm-hmm. And I think Houston has the latter at this point. And like, I think it is overreacting in the sense that, like, again, I don't think there are no resume holes for Houston yet, right? Okay, would I have loved them to be competitive against Boise State? Yes, obviously. It's also one game. You should,
right.
In any bat and ball sport, you should never overreact to one single game. But at the same time, as I say that, I just have so little confidence that the pitching staff is going to come together in a way that's going to keep this team out of the bottom 2 or 3 at best in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also not doing a whole lot for my confidence is the fact that Houston is currently hosting, again, admittedly a pretty good McNeese team, but they are losing 3-0 at home in the 4th inning.
They only have 1 hit so far. That's the concerning part for me.
Yeah, you started to my waiters, and she gave up a home run to the first batter of the game, got 1 out, walked 2 more batters, and then had to be taken out. In the first inning, when you're subbing out your pitcher in the first inning and you've got 3 healthy pitchers on the staff, not
great, boys.
Not the best.
The Cougars will this coming weekend be at Texas A&M Commerce for their final non-conference series before getting into Big 12 play. This is a Commerce team that went 9-29 last year. This year they are 5-13. They did play a top 25 Missouri team to a 1-0 loss, but the rest of their schedule is not impressive opponents and going 5-12 in those other games that are not against Missouri. So even on the road, I think comfortably this one has to be a Cougar sweep, or we will be coming back here probably being even more negative than we were this episode.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, and we'll keep it going with Cougar women's hoops, which you kind of heard the guys talking about as it was happening in the middle of their last episode. They got outscored by Iowa State 26-6 in the second quarter en route to a 12-point loss at home to the Cyclones. And then more recently and more damningly, I think, lost at TCU 59-49, a game the Cougs trailed 33-17 at halftime en route to a double-digit loss against an injury-ravaged TCU team playing essentially 6 players. So not the best result to be sure. Even on the road, that's a pretty ugly L to take.
I'll let Bobby handle most of this because he was physically there and I think probably has most to say about it. But I think the 59-49 score that kind of flatters U of H. I don't think the game was generally that competitive. We'll say Sedona Prince, TCU's awesome post player who was out hurt the last time these teams played, along with Madison Connor, who was there the last time the Cougs played them, but missed a good chunk of the last month or so, was also back. So was a bit closer to the TCU team at full strength, but I think also, like Bobby's going to get to, still, I think, frighteningly uncompetitive for large stretches.
Guys, like Sam said, I was at the game. Just a side note, my favorite part of this game was definitely not the product that was put on the court, but the fact that they had hustle stats, and one of the hustle stats was points in the paint and points off the bench. I don't know. I just thought that was quite comical. And then I think the other one was like fast break points, which I think is a legit hustle stat, but points in the paint, the opposite of anything hustle. So anyways, just a fun little note about TCU's stats on the that they had on their video board, little stat board things. I thought that was kind of funny. So I watched this U of H team score with 6 minutes and 16 seconds left in the first quarter. And I sat there and I watched all this basketball. I watched so much basketball. And then we did not score until there was 5:23 left in the second quarter. Guys, that's a full quarter of no points. Not a free throw, not anything. 0 points in 10 minutes, almost 11 minutes.
Not great.
That may be the worst U of H performance in terms of me being there. that I think I've ever been to. To not score for the only thing worse that's close was when SMU had 49 at halftime and we got 0 defensive stops in football a couple of years ago. Other than that, 0 points. And guys, the points that we got were free throws. Layla Blair made 2 free throws. We didn't have a field goal made. At one point, we were shooting 9% from the field. 9.
Against a really good Big 12 team, right?
Yeah, like against, oh no, wait, it was TCU. 9% from the field. Sam made a point and he goes, you could double our field.
That's something our team couldn't do.
Yeah. Sam said, if we doubled our field goal percentage, you would still be going, oh my
tripled.
God, we were only shooting 19%. There's or 18%. This is so bad. Nope. 9%. After the free throws, okay? So we scored our first 2 points in a quarter. It still took another 2 minutes for us to get a basket. So we went 12 minutes without a field goal. There's only 40 minutes in a game. We went over a quarter of the game without scoring a field goal. Do we need to break down the stats? Do we need to break anything else down?
No. I was
over
just gonna
10 minutes of 0 points and no field goals for 12. What are we doing? I told Sam this, and if we continue with this product, we just don't care anymore. It's strictly there to meet Title IX requirements. That's the only reason why you would have it and let it perform at this level. If you're going to do that, get rid of the basketball team and bring in gymnastics. Something.
Coach.
Something. Bring in equestrian. I don't care. If we're just going to do this, like, there's got to be another sport that we can field that will at least be different than something else I've watched. At least if you bring in gymnastics or equestrian or water polo, I've never been to one of those matches. I'll at least go and I can have a new experience. What are we doing?
Yeah, it's been rough. It's been rough watching the team this year. And it's, it would be hard to watch this team this year if this was year 1 of a new coach trying to get their feet under them, but knowing that this is year 10 of the current staff and that it was, we kind of saw this year coming. Like, it wasn't like we had any expectations going into the year that, like, no, Houston's going to go 500 in Big 12 play. Like, no, Houston's going to be a, like, bubble tournament team. Like, we knew that wasn't going to happen. Like, and you gave this coach year 10 to try to figure it out anyway. So I have had the same thought at many points this year and did again while watching this game, on my phone of just like, yeah, either you make a change at the end of this year, or you might as well just walk up to every one of us that wants to be a fan of Cougar women's basketball and be like, no, we do not care about winning women's basketball games at the University of Houston. And it bums me out. It's not like we talk about men's basketball for so much longer than women's basketball just because we're a bunch of, sexist pigs or whatever. Like when I went to my high school team, our girls team was way better than our boys team. I went to more girls high school basketball games than the boys team, and I played on the boys team, for crying out loud. I constantly was following them, in the state championship and everything, always wanting to go watch them play. I love good women's basketball. I love good basketball, period, regardless of whether it's men's or women's. But this is just not good basketball, not fun to watch. Just
every women's game when we were in college.
Talking about
Coach Curl.
Yeah.
Every game. Shake our hand, thank us for coming.
Following this team feels like a chore at this point, and that's time to make a leadership change.
Yeah, I think just
we don't call for coaches. We don't call for coaches on this pod. In the years I've listened, we've never gone like this. Just going, something has to change.
Yeah, I think we've been very patient, and just the results don't merit a continuing direction here. And just like it's a very veteran team too. That's the only unique playmaker. This isn't like, okay, like they did a roster reset, but there's a lot of like highly recruited high school players in this team. Like this will bear fruit in 2 or 3 years. No, like this is nearly all athletes at the later stages or end of their college eligibility, and you haven't looked competitive in the majority of the Big 12 games. It's just that simple.
So the Cougs do have 2 games remaining. They're about 45 minutes from tipping off at BYU, another team near the bottom of the Big 12 standings, and then they'll be hosting UCF on Saturday to finish the regular season. Also a team, and in fact, currently UCF is actually fully last place in the Big 12, one game behind Houston. Both of them playing tonight, unless Houston beats BYU and UCF loses to Kansas, which UCF probably will. Houston will have to win their last game of the regular season to avoid being in last place in the Big 12, tied for last, and would be dead last because UCF would have beaten them twice, would have the head-to-head. So, with 2 games to go, we've said all year we would love for Houston to try to make it through the year without having anyone finish absolutely dead last in the Big 12. But UCF lost to Kansas, so good. So Houston can clinch, not last. Houston has to
not
win.
DFL.
All Houston has to do to not finish DFL is beat BYU tonight or UCF on Saturday, neither of whom are good teams. So
the Cougars' magic number is 1.
Yeah. We'll see if they can make it. That's literally the only notes I have for either of those games. I don't know if you guys want to add games or are you done?
Nope.
Cool.
We'll put as much effort into analyzing future games as it appears our administration is in caring about the women's basketball team.
There you go. Bobby, talk golf to us.
All right, let's talk golf. So the men have 2 tournaments this week. One set of players gets to go play golf in Cabo, while the other have to go to Sugarland. This is in no way a shot at Sugarland, but I think I know which tournament I'd rather go to. I think I know which tournament I'd rather go to. Dustin's reaction when I was like, one's going to Cabo, you're like, yeah, the other's going to Sugarland. You threw your head back like, oh, no.
Drinking water. It was a bad time to drink some water. I had to do some control to make sure it stayed in my mouth. That's not even a knock at Sugarland. That's like, it's down the road. Everyone's been to Sugarland. It's that as much as anything else. But what are you gonna do?
And because Spike Park's great. Don't really have a preview, but I would imagine that your more senior players, your top 5 are probably going to Cabo, and the rest are going to play in the HCU tournament in Sugarland. The Sugarland tournament going to be a good way for a lot of younger guys to probably get into the get some tournament play. Tournament play is a lot different than just going out and playing practice rounds, things like that. You just feel a little bit more pressure. So any experience you can get, and I think that's why U of H is taking the tournament in Sugarland. Any experience you can get going out there playing tournament golf is always good. And then for the women, they had another okay week for them. They hosted the Chevron Classic. They finished 6th out of 16. Strong third round, vaulted the Cougs up 5 places. So they went into the third round in 11th spot. Went pretty low. I think they had the 3rd lowest round of any team in the tournament. Of the 16, they had the 3rd lowest third round. So that is going to jump them up quite a few places. Jumps them up 5 places. Nicole Abelar finishes tied for 13 at 8 under. Hyoin Kang takes T17 at 7 under. Alexis Saldana was actually having a pretty solid tournament at even par. And then the final 9 holes in what can only be called one of the toughest 9-hole stretches I've seen on a scorecard in a very long time goes 9 over in 9 holes. That is tough, and that has her finish at 9 over for the tournament. So she's playing good golf. She's playing really good golf throughout the entire tournament. Goes 9 over on her final 9 holes to drop pretty heavily, and that really hurts the Cougs quite a bit in their third round totals as well. I mean, she saves 9 strokes there. You have the best round. If she shoots even or even 2 over, you're probably jumping a couple of places there. So pretty tough there. Next week, the Lady Cougs are headed to Las Vegas to participate in UNLV's tournament.
I wanted to mention Santiago de Fuente
duh.
At the Mexican Open too.
Yeah,
you watched it. We were talking.
I know.
About
I watched it like multiple days. Only amateur to qualify, make the cut. So that's really good. And just super exciting for him. Anytime you make the cut, they say that's in the money. So unfortunately, he doesn't get the money for it. But being an amateur, always cool to see a Cougar who can qualify for a tournament like that.
All right, we absolutely have to talk Cougar tennis now. Sometimes it's last but not least, but it was kind of a rough week for the Cougar tennis team, guys. Unfortunately, losses to UTSA and UT Arlington. since we last talked about tennis on here. Guys, I was really excited to become kind of our de facto tennis correspondent this season. I mean, I knew the Big 12 would be tough, but I've gotten kind of back into tennis thanks to, I think, largely the fantastic Netflix sports documentary Breakpoint, which follows various high-level tennis pros on and off the court. I started playing a racket sport, just kind of got me more plugged into that part of the sports world. U of H, guys, has had maybe their worst start to a tennis season in program history, which I
nailed it.
really hate coming on here and saying. UH, again, go back a little bit before this week, UH had never lost to UTRGV before the season and 11 previous all-time head-to-heads. Had a 10-match win streak versus UTSA before losing this season and last season. UT Arlington has actually done pretty well in the all-time head-to-head series, and I think if this season finishes as badly as it looks like it will, I think it would actually behoove the Cougars to look at UTA's coach, Diego Benitez, who has led the Lady Mavs to several NCAA regionals, along with some individuals doing pretty well in the postseason in previous years, consistently has UTA outperforming UH on what I imagine is it's not a huge budget, but it's really vexing, guys. The vast majority of the athletes who are playing week in, week out are returners from the previous teams who didn't struggle against this level of non-conference opponent. I mean,
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And the road does not get easier from here either, because Cougars are opening up Big 12 play this week against the ITA number 22 Texas Tech Red Raiders in Houston. And the Red Raiders are 7-4 with all 4 of their losses in the spring season coming against top 35 opponents. They've played a pretty tough schedule so far. Saturday, you're going to host number 39 BYU, who's 8-1. Cougars with a U don't look like they play as tough of a schedule as Tech, but head-to-head wins over Mizzou and Arizona. So play a considerably tougher schedule than U of H and done a bit better. I mean, you didn't get more than 2 points against UTSA or UTA. Unfortunately, I would be surprised if we even get to 2 points in either of these matchups. It's going to be tough, and wish I had the answer, but I don't. But unfortunately, that's where Cougar tennis is right now.
All right, guys. Well, we don't want to end the podcast on a sour note, so I've got some great news, which is that Cougar softball has scored 3 runs in the bottom of the 4th to tie it
Let's
up.
Go.
Let's go, Cougs. Going. Here we go. Let's get the softball program back on track. That's it for us on the way out. As always, big old thank you to our podcast Patreon supporters. We would love for you to support the work that we do week in and week out by going to patreon.com/shpodcast. You can also get in contact with us, shpodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at shpodcast. You can blue sky at us at podcast.bsky.social. And you can help us out also by leaving a 5-star review in your app of choice. That would be very much appreciated as well. That's it for us. You are an absolute rock star if you made it all the way to the end. And as always,
go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Vamos los Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs. Let's go.